Today, we confirmed that RCMP are now officially being sued for over $130,000 after their sabotage of excavators near the Coutts blockade. And we have the statement of claim to prove it.
We're a peaceful protest, but we don't expect our authorities to break the law and to vandalize and to trespass. I think somebody should be held to account.
Today, we uncover the details of this new six-figure lawsuit. We get an exclusive response from the RCMP. And we speak with Chad Williamson of Williamson Law, the firm representing all three plaintiffs free of charge in this claim, thanks to your generous crowdfunding through Rebel News at truckerlawyer.ca.
This goes beyond mere disabling or seizing. This is really a destruction of private property by a government body without what we say is lawful reason for them to do so.
RCMP now face a massive six-figure lawsuit, but what alleged misconduct led to such a large claim? The excavator's story begins with the Coutts blockade, which coincided with the Freedom Convoy movement in Ottawa during January and February 2022. Albertans peacefully demonstrated for almost 3 weeks straight against vaccination mandates and COVID restrictions. Demonstrations centered around Coutts, which hosts the province's largest international border crossing into the United States, which saw travel restricted by the federal government at the time. Demonstrations included prayer services, sports games, restaurant services, chances for in-person connection, daily life activities that the government sequestered from Canadians for 2 years, and of course, the on and off blockade, disrupting travel through the international border. Coutts demonstrators decidedly ended the blockade on February 14th after RCMP executed search warrants in the town of Coutts. They ended demonstrations to emphasize that this was a peaceful movement. Just days before the Coutts blockade disbanded, on February 12th, RCMP say that 3 excavators arrived nearby, and 1 day later, it was discovered that these vehicles had been disabled.
Everything is legal what we did.
Mm-hmm. And we had parked them closer to the highway, and they weren't happy with that, so we backed them all the way off, about a half a kilometer.
Yeah, that's an important part of it.
Yes. So they demanded we moved them, and they still did it.
Yeah.
They still disabled them.
A few of the boys have brought out some equipment here, and they parked it on private land with permission from the owner to park it here. RCMP, they had it parked within view of the highway. RCMP requested that it be moved out of view of the highway, so we've obliged them. After it was moved here, somebody sabotaged the equipment. There's wires cut, there's filters removed, spray foam put up, fuel lines. Like these things, all 3 machines, they're valuable machines. And it's going to take a lot of work to put them back into order. But what we do know is that we're not fighting this fight violently. We're a peaceful protest, but we don't expect our authorities to break the law and to vandalize and to trespass. I think somebody should be held to account.
That same day, I was personally able to confirm with the RCMP that they were in fact the perpetrators.
So I can confirm that we disabled 3 excavators.
Yep.
To prevent the equipment from being used in the illegal activity of the blockade.
And we found out more about these excavators during the Public Order Emergency Commission, which was mandated to publicly inquire into the circumstances that led to the invocation of the Emergencies Act between February 14th to 23rd, 2022, and the measures taken therein.
Them being very aware of 2 excavators on the side of the highway, as to what's going on here, who's doing this. When the 3rd one rolled in, it resulted in a heavy response. 40 officers descended on that field and on those individuals operating those hi-os, and they were ordered to retreat. And I got the call that the understanding was to move these excavators out of the area, and they are not gone. And I had said, well, we can move them further, but we can't get them out of the area right away. It just isn't possible. I went into service, the call was dropped, and I got out of service, and I got a few messages. Sorry, Marco, the decision was made. We've had to disable these protests.
And that's because the RCMP thought the excavators were...
it was too big of a liability in their mind.
Okay.
They looked at this from a we're going to dig up the highway perspective.
Right.
And I understand that those machines have the ability to do that, but that was never our intentions.
We previously heard from Williamson Law, who informed us that a statement of claim against RCMP was underway on behalf of the vehicle owners. Williamson Law is representing the 3 owners of the sabotaged heavy equipment at no cost. As a Rebel News initiative, these legal fees are being crowdfunded through your generous support at truckerlawyer.ca. The statement of claim Williamson Law has now submitted identifies parties involved and a timeline of events, detailing how the plaintiff saw the situation. Most of what is in this claim has already been addressed, but interestingly, the claim alleges that during text messages exchanged with the RCMP regarding the vandalism, an RCMP officer confirmed that the excavators were disabled and stated that it was not the RCMP's call, but the decision to disable the excavators was made at a much higher level. And the plaintiffs state that the decision to disable the excavators was politically motivated, meant to punish the plaintiffs and other third-party demonstrators. Remedy sought by the plaintiffs breaks down into 2 things. 1, a declaration that their 2B charter rights were infringed, meaning their fundamental freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression. And 2, damages amounting to over $132,000, and additional damages to be proven or awarded in court. We spoke with Williamson Law, who had this to say about the situation.
So during the Coutts blockade around the middle of February, the owner-operators had sought and obtained permission to drive these excavators and these pieces of heavy equipment, there's 3 of them in total, down to a farmer's private property, whereon they would basically just park the excavators and hang flags and messages of support for the blockade. Now, again, that's their charter right to do so. We've all got a right to freedom of expression. The RCMP had alleged that these posed a danger to something. We're not sure exactly what the danger is. And frankly, we haven't seen any evidence that they were relying on anything apart from sheer malice in taking action against the excavators. So they asked that the excavators be moved. It was my understanding that an agreement actually had been struck that the excavators would be moved to a different spot outside of what the RCMP were considering to be a dangerous area. And it's further my understanding that before that happened, the RCMP trespassed onto this private property and completely, they didn't just disable the excavators. They vandalized them and they sabotaged them to the point where they required extensive repairs to bring them back into operation. So these are things like damaging fuel lines, using spray foam on critical engine components, cutting wires. This goes beyond mere disabling or seizing. This is really a destruction of private property by a government body without what we say is lawful reason for them to do so. Each one of the owner-operators of the vehicles that were destroyed by the RCMP, or at least vandalized and damaged by the RCMP, they've suffered what we call compensatory damages, right, for loss of use, for the repairs. We're also suing for what are called punitive and aggravated damages for essentially just taking unlawful steps to basically trash this stuff without any reasonable reason to do so. We haven't seen any of their production, so it's not clear at this point whether or not they got a court order to do that. I'm guessing the answer is no. We're suing for close to or over $150,000. Obviously, you know, there are constitutional elements, and we've actually pled that there were breaches of our client's charter rights to freedom of expression. The excavators were only to be used for the hanging of flags, which is an enumerated part of freedom of expression. As detailed in Section 2B of the Charter on Rights and Freedoms. So there is a minor charter argument, but what we're really seeking here is for the RCMP to compensate the owner-operators of these excavators for the unlawful destruction of those vehicles. At the end of the day, the owner-operators of the excavators and the heavy equipment, they were just supporters of the Coutts demonstration. They're expressing their charter right to freedom of expression, and they were subject to what we say is completely unlawful and frankly disgusting action by the RCMP, not just to damage them civilly, but also to shut them up and to infringe on their right to freedom of expression. It's overreach by the RCMP, and we're going to hold them to account for that. So we've all heard stories and allegations of the border's disruption and all that sort of stuff. But frankly, that doesn't give anybody a lawful justification for trespassing onto private property without the authorization of that property owner and then committing such an egregious act of vandalism and sabotage. It's going to be our intention to find out what the motivation was by requesting the internal documents pertaining to the decision to disable these vehicles. So was this a reprisal? Was it a tit for tat? We don't know. But that's going to be part of the lawsuit, and we do want to find those documents. And if necessary, we will make an application for the disclosure of the same.
Now, since this statement of claim has been sent to RCMP, we reached out to Alberta's RCMP Media Relations Manager. After posing my questions, which we'll go through in a minute, Officer Fraser had this to say. The arrival of the excavators on Saturday, February 12th, day 15 of the protest, followed 3 consecutive evenings of farm equipment arriving at the scene, failing to stop for police, driving dangerously close to police, and soon being used to block the highway. Our Community Conflict Management Group members spoke to the protest organizers and said that the equipment needed to be removed from the immediate geographical area, or it would be disabled. While the equipment was moved 500 meters from their original location, the excavators still posed a threat to the further continuation of the existing offenses, such as the illegal blockade of the Coutts border crossing, as well as a risk to police and public safety. Further considerations at the time were the significant number of protester vehicles and equipment already blocking the highway and seriously restricting the free flow of emergency vehicles into the village of Coutts and Sweetgrass Coutts Joint Border Inspection Station. As such, the RCMP was required to make the operational decision to disable the equipment. Unfortunately, this response left many questions unanswered, such as, what legal authority was granted to vandalize and allegedly trespass? What steps were taken? Were any alternative actions first considered? And have any operational procedures been adjusted in relation to this incident? Did this have anything to do with the raids in Coutts that same night, or the invocation of the Emergencies Act the day after? Do they stand by their actions? And how will they commit to transparency moving forward? This was their response. Unfortunately, we aren't able to provide any more details. Now, in all fairness, there are many limitations preventing a more robust response, such as operational procedures, legal advice pending investigations, privacy concerns, or the sub judice rule. Regardless, we'll stay tuned as the situation unfolds and more information becomes available, but for now I can say it's because of your generous donations through truckerlawyer.ca that these excavator owners were able to pursue legal action against the RCMP without having to spend the additional costs already on top of recovering the excavators to now then go forward and pay these legal fees. This is all thanks to your support through truckerlawyer.ca. For Rebel News, Syd Fizzard. If you want to see more of our Coutts blockade coverage, or if you want to donate to the legal defense of the excavator owners and many others charged in relation to the Coutts blockade, head to truckerlawyer.ca.